Today, let's talk about the round bead presser foot and how to use it. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today we are talking about the round bead presser foot. Now this is part of my Stitchmas series, so today we are looking at all of our presser feet and we are going with a brand new one, which is this round bead presser foot. Now in comparison, this presser foot is almost a little chunkier, so as you can see there's actually these channels that are underneath this presser foot. So this is a clear presser foot, you're able to see through it while you're using it, but there's this big channel or almost like a groove, and that's to allow you to put like a beaded trim through it so you could sew that onto your fabric. So if we look at my regular presser foot, it's smooth on the bottom, really nothing's going on there, but this one you have that like deep channel and groove, and that would be where you would put some sort of beaded trim or just a thicker trim into so that you're able to sew that onto your fabric. Now for your beaded trims, I have a couple to try here. So I have almost like this faux leather type with little studs. It does fit within that little channel, so we're going to try sewing this one on. And one thing I did read online is that whenever you use these, if you're using them for like a very serious project, you should always bring this presser foot with you. So I found this little beaded, it's actually a necklace, but it fits very nicely within the little groove, so we're going to be trying to sew this onto some fabric as well. And then finally, I did find these sequins. I will say the sequins are going to be a fail, and you'll see why a little bit later. Then I have my cotton fabric to just try on. So to install this, it's very simple. You just kind of press it into your sewing machine. I press that little black clip and it clips on. Now to use this presser foot, you're going to use a zigzag stitch, and this is so that the needle can go back and forth over whatever trim you are using. So you can actually make this be a little bit, the stitch length to be a little longer, as well as the stitch width to be a little wider. And the stitch width is something that you'll actually adjust depending on the size of your trim. So first thing I did was I actually just sewed a regular zigzag stitch onto the fabric to make sure that everything was working properly. I did find that for my machine I needed to rethread it and rethread the bobbin, just because sometimes the zigzag stitch is a little finicky, so that would be one suggestion I'd have if you run into any issues. Then I got my beads and I decided to use the beaded trim first, and you're just going to be placing that underneath into the little channel or groove in this presser foot, and then you're making sure that you have the zigzag stitch turned on, and then as you can see here the needle's going to go back and forth over top of the beads and then just go very slowly. This was actually the speed that I did this at because I was so nervous about sewing the beads onto the fabric. But as you can see, you're just going to go back and forth, and then this will actually sew this trim onto your material. You're not actually hitting it with your needle. Everything works out well. So at this point, it is complete, and you can see the beads are actually sewn onto the fabric. So it's a really interesting presser foot that it does work that way, especially when you are using these smaller trims. Now I did try to use the sequins like I talked about. The sequins and my stitch width were not done correctly, so the stitch width was too small. It ended up going through a sequin and I did break a needle, so it was not a successful trial. But my third attempt, I did use this trim that is almost like the leather with those studs on it. And for this one, I knew that the needle could go through that leather, so worst case, I was not going to be breaking any needles as I had installed a slightly larger needle for this. And to go through it, it actually worked really well. Now, one thing I did notice for this was that this trim was bigger than that rounded beads that I'd used earlier. So I really needed to adjust the stitch width on this one to make it be a little bit bigger. But again, a lot with this presser foot is really trial and error and figuring out what works and what does not work. So in this case, while it does sew it on, it actually is sewing through the trim, so it's not really as desirable of an effect. When I did increase the stitch width though, it does work and it gives it a really nice clean effect. So I was happy with how it was turning out. And I would say that I could definitely see using this for more trims in the future. So as you can see here, the thread is just going back and forth over the trim instead of actually sewing through it, which that is the effect that you want. So looking back, this was a very interesting presser foot. I never really had imagined having a presser foot that I could sew trims onto, like how it kind of sews over it. The zigzag stitch is a really fun effect though, and then I think especially if you were to use matching thread, you wouldn't be able to see it. I more did the screen so that you'd be able to see on camera, if there was any issues with it. It worked so well for this beads though. I definitely can see why you should always bring this with you to the fabric store, wherever you're getting your beaded trim if you're able to, so that you can see if it will fit in that channel or not. But besides that, this was a really interesting presser foot for me to get to learn about. I will say that I don't think I'm going to be using it for like really thick trims, but I may start to try to incorporate some more of like beads into my work. And then I just want to show you the back, so you can see you just get a really nice zigzag stitch on the back. Everything looks good with it. And I will say that this feels very secure, so like these beads, those trims, they do not feel like they're coming off anytime soon. So I think that this could be a really great option, especially if you do a lot of work with sewing appliques or these trims onto your fabric. Let me know if you ever used one of these before and any tips and tricks you have for working with it, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next video.